And we're back. Hey, hey, hey. Last Techorama TV panel of the day. I did all day to come up with that. It's not going to get any better than this.
Happy to be here, Gerald. Glad to see you.
Thank you. Glad to see you too. I'm here today, well, not today, this hour, with Richard Clemens.
However you like it.
Whatever you like it. Amber. And I have some introduction right here, but I'm pretty sure that you can probably introduce yourself best. So, Amber, if you will start us off. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Amber, and I'm the founder of the Pathways Group. We're an international leadership development company. And so we help people improve in things like communication and critical thinking and emotional intelligence.
Awesome. Clemens?
Clemens Vasters. I'm here because I work at Microsoft, I think. And I'm the lead architect for the messaging services that are in the Azure cloud and for Fabric event streams in Microsoft Fabric. I've been in the industry for a long time, so long that I still know Richard when the beer wasn't great.
Yeah. When yours wasn't great either, friend. It's been more than 20 years.
Yes.
I'm Richard Campbell. I'm the host of .NET Rocks, Run As Radio, and now Windows Weekly. And I also make a lot of things. So mostly these days I sit on advisory committees for different companies talking about technology.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm sure you don't even need an introduction technically. Probably a lot of people already know you. I'm kind of glad that you recognize the gray beards and stuff going on, because it's interesting. We want to talk for this hour kind of like trends, very broad topic. But I can imagine you've already been through a couple of trends, right? You're experienced people, let's put it like that. I got a couple of talking points here, and I just want to drop in the first one, which is kind of like interesting. We live in a time where technology is evolving faster than our ability to adapt. Is that kind of like something that resonates?
I would argue that's always been true, but yes.
What do you think? And I have it's not on my paper right here, but I have a nice challenge to add. So the question is, what's really changing the game right now? And can we talk about that without mentioning AI?
It's automation, right? Like you talk about, can people adapt quickly? Like, we get the Luddites back in the 1800s when automation of weaving was coming into play, and they couldn't adapt either and smashed up the equipment, although ultimately it got repaired. Some of them did get retrained, and the big consequence of weaving automation was reducing the cost of clothing enough that you went from typically owning two sets of clothes, the ones you played in, the ones you got buried in or went to church in, to having lots of clothes. Like, that's what automation does. And we are in a new wave of automation.
Clemens?
I think just in general, information flow is a big trend, and I think probably the biggest trend. Information flow in many ways. So first of all, we're doing, without mentioning the word, we're doing more and more data-driven decisions in tighter time intervals. So decisions are being made more in real time. There's more expectation of real time, right? I'm citing the example of you have an app where you are ordering a taxi, and by now the expectation is that if the app says that car is going to come around the corner and you look down the street and it's not, that doesn't line up, people are disappointed. But think of the incredible data flow and the engineering that needs to happen to realize this, right? To correlate it on the map and to get that information, get the moving car kind of into the app that the user holds in their hands. So we're having more and more of these more information flow, and then also to bring this to a kind of social, political aspect, which I think is important. We also deal with challenges to the validity and verifiability of data at the same time. So I think information flow, acceleration and increasing volume is a trend, but also the verifiability and what does it actually mean, and how objective and subjective is that?
Amber, you're in the business of teaching people things. So is this something that kind of like comes up to you as well? Like, hey, the content is adding faster. We need more new things. We can't learn fast enough.
From a macro level, yeah, it completely is changing the way that we look at the way that we're even preparing for a profession. The idea of learning a skill set or learning a job and that being your job for the rest of your career, that's really no longer existent because it is changing so quickly. We're getting new tools, new processes, and so I think Satya Nadella said it best when he said we have to shift from a know-it-all society, a know-it-all culture, to a learn-it-all culture. And so adapting that continuous growth mindset has always been important. It's more important now than ever before. It's not, oh, I won't get that promotion. It's, no, that job will not exist. I have to continuously upskill. We had a company recently that, I'm going to forget the percentage, so I'm going to make up a number. It was something in the range of about 20% of their positions were not going to be around in about 7 years. And so they started investing in upskilling and reskilling for new positions. While that 20% was going away, there was another 20% of new roles that were coming in. What that meant is that workforce had to be upskilled and reskilled for new positions. And we're seeing those trends go on just on a macro level in organizations in a variety of industries.
You started this conversation with something interesting. Like we've always kind of like struggled to keep up with things.
Yep.
Are we just kind of like out of our league? Should we just stop innovating because we can't kind of comprehend what we are creating here?
I mean, it's not how our society works, right? Like we've built a technological society that builds new innovations all of the time. We often talk about what we should do with them after that. Sometimes we're pretty careful with them. See nuclear weapons, and sometimes they just naturally evolve into a state that's less important. But there is no go back. That's never been the case. So there's only go forward, and what does that forward look like, and how do we do it responsibly? That being said, you can't plan for everything. You can't make driver's licenses before you make cars. Like you have to have a problem before you can realistically fix a problem. And the scary part, I think, for a lot of folks is problems are emerging so quickly that our ability to respond to them is something we're struggling with now.
That's actually an interesting point. That kind of like triggers me into like, we always have the feeling, and then I'm going into big topics really quickly, but that these things are happening faster. Now with like social media is a great example where they're trying to, at least in Europe, come up with rules like under 15. We're actually voting here today. It's the elections. Go vote if you haven't done so yet. With like, hey, the minimum age that kids should be allowed on social media at all is like 15 years old, right? But social media has been around for a long time now. But that really resonates with me that you're saying like, hey, we have to invent the thing first and then kind of like come up with.
Yeah, and I would argue that social media has been one of our society's fails that we didn't respond quickly enough. Like it is 20 years old. We're slow to the mark here. We should have moved faster. And if we'd addressed the privacy issues of social media, we'd have fewer issues with the things that are happening today.
I see, Clemens, you're like, we should have done something with social media before, and you were like nodding as crazy. That's something that you're...
Yes. So speaking as a European citizen here, so I live and work in Germany, even though I work for an American company. I believe that the European Union has done numerous good things with its regulation. And I think that is the right direction to use the power of the general consensus that we have in Europe about how we want to that we want to be a democratic society, that we want to have democracy be the will of the people and not the will of the few. That we use that consensus to drive legislation that reins in some of these oligarchic tendencies. So the fact that the GDPR, and whenever the EU Commission decides to do, ends up must be laws that are instituted in the various parliaments across Europe. So it's not that the EU Commission goes around in a dictatorship and just dictates things because those things become the law. So the GDPR is something that has real power because it has actually had the force to go and make large companies in this space behave better regarding privacy. the Digital Services Act is also doing good work, kind of in that direction. So I'm all for legislation having more bite, and also all for the precedent that the GDPR set by setting fines that hurt, setting levels where a CEO of a major international multinational corporation gets afraid if they have to suddenly put 5 billion euros on the table as a fine for misbehavior. So I agree with us having been behind on doing regulation. I think the regulators are now catching up, but they're again behind in AI, and so there will be.
You broke the challenge. No.
Yeah, sorry. But it's and so that there will be more happening. Now, I believe that there's good in on all the technologies, but I think having a balance between, what do we allow as a society and what is possible in technology, striking that balance is always kind of difficult. And Europe, I think, is in a better place there than many other places in the world.
I think in addition to that, so in partnership with, is also educating and advocating for how we're using data as an individual user. So me knowing where my data is going, me knowing my own privacy tactics that I can use. And so it's being reinforced by regulations and being reinforced by my knowledge and understanding and real understanding of the consequences and the impact of my actions as an individual. And so it comes from both ends of I know that I should wear my seatbelt because it's the law, and I also know I should wear my seatbelt because I value my own safety. And so it's two-tiered.
I totally see that. The one thing that kind of comes to mind is a discussion here, and I'm kind of curious from the Americans how you view that. Yes, all that stuff is important. Totally agree with that. But isn't that also the thing here in Europe? What's kind of holding us back? All the regulations, all the rules. That's why people go to America. Hey, there you have less rules. We can go faster. We can make more money. We can do all the things.
I disagree. Not the regulation that holds them back. It's the financing models. That's a cultural thing. The banking systems in Europe are older and they're far more financially conservative. What's unique about America is how little consequence there is to bankruptcy. It's a place where people are willing to take risk with their money in exchange for that opportunity, and I don't think there's any other place like that. There are regulatory models in the US as well. Some of them are kind of nuts too, but that's not the issue. The issue is availability of money. I think makes more difference to what's possible for certain technologies, and is why. Now, I'll tell you this: as a Canadian,
I'm sorry, that's totally right.
I have done a set of startups in Canada, and the pressure to move to the US is extraordinary because there is so much more money available because they understand the financial system better, and Canadian financiers or investors are more conservative than American. But that's been the driving force on that.
What's remarkable in that respect, if you think about money flows and what effects they have, the Russian the war waged by the Russians on Ukraine has now set free enormous amounts of money investments from the Western European governments to fund, to basically make up for the mistakes of just abandoning all the tanks and everything that right after the Cold War, and rearming, because the threat is obviously in front of our doorstep and it's not going away. But now we have literally hundreds of billions of euros, which are now available as investments. You now see a startup scene that goes right straight into this. And there is, like, the German Bundeswehr, the Cyber Hub, is running hackathons basically for shooting down drones, right? For startups. So the financing model is a real problem. But I think as soon as there is a pot of money, the startup scene in Europe
it'll emerge.
Will emerge, and we have a lot of clever people who are doing very interesting stuff, and there will be a lot of people who are doing a lot of interesting things in defense now, as a technology field, probably more than in AI and in other things.
Since we're talking about AI anyway now, like we've already established, you've been going through a couple of trends by now, right? Like, is this one different than the ones that we've kind of like seen before? Is there kind of like, something new here, or is it kind of like always the same pattern of like, oh, there's something new, like the Gartner hype cycle probably, right? Like, oh, this is amazing, oh, it's normal now, oh, and the bubble kind of like bursts. Is this any different? Are we going to go some direction, Amber?
You asked several questions, so I'm
For
going
sure. Answer anyone you like.
Proper hype cycle, yes, I think that there is a hype. What we've seen from our end is a unique shift from the people dynamics, the social dynamics, and how it's impacting. Now, I don't want to give all the credit to AI, right? Part of this is post-pandemic, part of this is different working models of hybrid work, so it's not all AI. We have gotten more requests in the last 18 months on building up topics like building up skills like critical thinking more than ever before. That used to be way, way down at the bottom. It's now in our top 5 of requests from companies saying we need to build up our critical thinking skills.
But is that then still linked to AI, would you say?
Specific, the
Right.
context in which we're getting those calls, yes. Building up emotional intelligence, right? So there's something about I am sitting at my computer talking to a machine about a topic, and then I get a Teams message or a Slack message from a person on the same topic. I have to pause and say, Amber, you are no longer talking to a machine. Yeah. Now is a opportunity. It's actually a requirement that you are using things like empathy. You're using some of those people skills. Correct spelling, right? And so we're seeing some of that shift of we spend so much time asking, how do I ask a proper question or a good prompt to a machine? Well, how am I asking good prompts to people? And so we've seen a shift. Sometimes it's the same topic, but the dynamic of the topic, like communication, has shifted in social dynamics as we're seeing this rise. And again, I don't want to give all the credit just to AI. There's other factors at play here. But in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen a massive shift in the types of skills that are being requested for upskilling within teams. And that is being impacted by the speed that AI is shaping the workforce.
I mean, I'm glad that's true, because I think we've undervalued critical thinking for a long time. Like, it doesn't surprise me that it was the bottom of the list, because a lot of people believed they could think critically even when they couldn't. And arguably what's been going on lately has made people aware, hey, I'm really not thinking critically and I should work on this. Or at least leadership is recognizing it in their people and saying, we need to work on this.
Well, the difference with the way that AI makes the impact is it just escalates it so much more quickly. Sure. So beforehand, we weren't using critical thinking. It may take just a little bit longer before we see the consequences of that. Now we can go into AI, get that strategy, and try and implement it very quickly without looking at the big picture and inviting the right people into the room. So it's escalating some of those consequences, expediting some of those consequences.
Yeah.
That's
a good trend, though. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm at Microsoft too. We're encouraged to use AI for our jobs. Are you feeling that you're more productive with that, or are you like, should I not ask you this on camera? I don't know.
No. So I'm writing a lot of code for the various projects that I have, and I have some special projects where I'm just trying to push the push the envelope. Try to be a little bit innovative, and much of that code is the result of a conversation between me and Copilot, because it opens up a way for me to do things that are otherwise out of reach, just because of the learning requirement to go and get good at whatever current browser CSS. Right? There are just entire universes of complication that probably shouldn't be so hard, but are hard, and that you need to get into. And so AI can go and knows these things, kind of, sort of, and can go and help you. For people who understand their field, specifically in programming, it can be an enormous accelerator. I'm not going to say X so many times, but it's an enormous accelerator. But it's only an accelerator because we have the judgment and with enough experience that you can go look at a result that it gives you and say, that's good or that's garbage. And then you can go and yell at it and say, well, that's garbage, but I kind of like the direction, so go and make the following changes. So you have and the way how I treat it is like a 2 years on the job apprentice who is super motivated, but I can't trust it at any point in time. So that's so for programmers, great. In other areas of a large company, I think the results are more spotty, and I have had colleagues basically throwing documents over the fence to me and say, can you go and review this? And I'm like, you didn't write this.
Yeah, it's very apparent.
So that happens too. So it's I think for programming it's perfect because it's a very constrained thing. As soon as you get into places where the requirements are not as constrained, then it's hit or miss.
In some ways, I feel like programming languages are special because the compiler always has a say. The languages themselves are inherently more specific because they are programming languages. So these LLMs respond better in that context than they do in normal human languages, where meaning is a lot less concise.
And I'm afraid of the output of, like when I go and ask ChatGPT a question and it gives me an answer, I know that I can't trust it without having set a lot of context because I know what it does when it writes code.
Right. Well, and there's been great studies saying the more you understand about using these technologies, the less you trust them. That the ones that are the most confident in them, the ones who have no idea.
Yes. We have people at Microsoft whose job it is to figure out how to write validation for the output of the AI. So we're building, inside of the Fabric team, we're building a tool called the Operations Agent. And the Operations Agent is driven by, it basically creates its playbook using AI, but we have special data scientists who try to figure out how can I go and verify that the output, that this playbook is actually plausible and can be executed. And so you need to go and create these constraints for those things to work. It's an interesting balance to strike.
I was talking a little bit earlier today to someone who said, like, I feel that we're close to the AI bubble bursting, because I got kind of like triggered because what you're saying, like, a lot of the AI stuff, and maybe that's only because I'm in my little bubble, is a lot about like programming, helping it how to code. Is there much use case kind of like outside of it? Are companies using it kind of like outside of and being successful? Like, sure, there's co-pilots and you can ask it all kinds. You can ask it for a recipe, whatever. It will kind of like, the quality will not be as good. I feel like we're training it a lot to help us write code, but outside of that, is that going well?
You look like you have an answer.
You go.
We use it we use it every day. Specifically, it has been so powerful in helping us to customize and personalize a lot of the experiences that we have. And this can go on a micro level and a macro level, right? So we want something specifically for this industry, in this geography, in this company. It can help us customize in a way that is more specific and at a faster pace. And so we do that with workshops and with facilitation. Of course, then you have to spend the time verifying. You have to you can't just take these, it hallucinates, right? So you have to understand the opportunities and the limitations. Same on an individual level. We have AI customization within our LMS that we've created. So we have everything, it's not generative AI, but you can put in and I say these are the specific challenges, the opportunities, my leadership style, and it'll give you specifically the content that is for you versus here's a catalog of 50 different courses that you could take. So there are ways that we can customize not only for the individual, but also organizationally. Just like what you said, it gives us a good starting point. It's not an ending point. So it does have limitations. It has allowed us to work faster and more efficiently and give us some greater understanding. Big question we have then is if we've saved some time here, how are we reinvesting that time? So it gave us a good starting point for customization. Now let's reinvest it to really make it robust and effective. And that's a big thing that we work with leaders on is, okay, you save some time administratively with HR, talk about all of the ways that you're able to save in some basic admin tasks. The percentage of that position that is now being able to be automated in a very positive way, right? This is a very simple task. So the question is how are you now reinvesting that time? How are you reinvesting that energy? You have to make sure that it's correct. You have to make sure this now gives you that time to be more strategic in your planning, to actually do the human side of human resources and be more personal. That's the whole reason. And there's entire professions and industries that there were aspects of the role that we aspired to for years, but we simply did not have the bandwidth to do. Now you have that bandwidth. How are you reinvesting that how are you reinvesting that time, energy, focus to do your job extremely well? And you looked at, and I gave the example of HR. We worked with a group of librarians, and they said, we're not spending as much time using the Dewey Decimal System and shelving books. You know how we're reinvesting our time? We're running education programs. That's something, imagine 100 years ago, a librarian would say, I don't have time for that. I'm shelving my books, right? This is all the bandwidth that I have time for. Now I'm reinvesting it in something great. But again, it comes, and this is how we begin and end all of our conversations, is you have to understand, yes, the opportunities and the limitations, both.
We saw the same thing happen to administrators when the cloud came in. You know, the folks that wanted to rack and stack servers, they weren't going to do that anymore. But they never got around to a lot of the maintenance issues and preventative work because they were so busy just keeping gear running. And as we got better automation to take over that, didn't need to own the machines anymore, they had time to start putting into higher value, thoughtful work that made more reliable systems.
Yeah. So it has to make it more effective, not just efficient.
And that then comes back to the critical thinking, right? Like you have to still parse kind of like, you know, what comes out of it and if that makes sense, yes or no. What I'm hearing with this, what I hear a lot in the software development context is like, hey, we're gaining a bunch of junior developers, right? Like they kind of know what they do, but they also need some more instructions, context, et cetera, et cetera. That's also what I hear you say a little bit, like, hey, we got people that kind of like do the work that we don't really want to do, right? That we want to focus on other things, and now we finally have the time to do that. Looking forward, no one can predict the future. I had someone, I talked about AI yesterday, how you can be more productive as a software developer with all the tools that we have right now. Came up to me with like, every session I see, I become increasingly worried that it's going to take my job. Are the interns, are the junior developers going to kind of like grow up into senior developers and we can all just, you know, automate a whole bunch of jobs and just sit around talking like this all day?
I think the training's is in the process of changing. You know, arguably, when I talk to really young people just getting into programming, they seem better suited for these new tools than we are, that we have more to unlearn. They didn't join this industry to become a coder. They joined this industry to make things. The job
it doesn't really matter how.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that wasn't the important part. We taught them, you're going to have to learn to write code, somewhat reluctantly. You know, and we know perfectly well if you've been responsible for building a system, the code writing part's the easy, right? The real hard part is figuring out what do they actually need, the requirements gathering, actually getting people to think through the needs, how you actually make a difference to a company. That's not a prompt, and it's also not code.
This industry goes through, I think, doubling of the number of programmers that exist overall in the world every, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And has been for the last 30, 40 years. And when we look back 30 years ago, you didn't have to know assembly language, but it was pretty helpful when you were debugging things in your C programs. And then managed code came along, Java, C#, and they kind of, that was kind of the level of, you don't need to worry about that level anymore.
No,
because it's
the fancy guy looked at the IL.
Yes.
That was the deep layer.
That was the deep layer. But so there's always a deep layer, but there's always a level of abstraction. And I think the more, now we have a lot of people who are doing programming style education, university master's studies, who the only programming language they have ever used is Python. Like there's, I'm doing quite a bit of work in sports these days, and so I have interviewed people as well as looked at a lot of papers in that area. And there's people who are have a bachelor's and master's degree in data science in sports, who have done massively complicated things with data, and the only programming language they know is Python. And I think we're going to continue to see a broadening of the base. So there's going to be more and more and more people who write software, but we have a limit to how many people we can go and teach the lower levels, and so many of them will then go and come to a no-code, low-code, AI-driven experience where they can go and build their solutions. There will still be people who will have to understand how the GPU works and who still know how the CPU works and all these things. But these are specialists at a few companies.
Sure. There's a handful of people at Microsoft that know how to write garbage collectors.
Correct.
They are very specialized people,
Correct.
and we love that they exist.
Yeah.
And I'm also really happy I'm not one of them.
And there are people like me who kind of do queues.
You focus on messaging.
Queues and streams every day.
At a different level.
Yeah. And so there's platform people like me will always exist, right? And people who are writing specs, but those specs are then being fed into and I literally, like in the current project or in X Registry, we verify whether the specs are actually understood by the models, so that we can go and generate a lot of the samples and all these things. That's a lot of my work.
Yeah.
So yes, there will be a different type of programmer job that probably doesn't even get into a level of Python anymore, but only works at the 25 years ago, we had this idea of programming by pictures, use case tools, and all these things, right? And I think we're now at a place where we can probably go and realistically do this for solutions that are useful.
Here's what we don't know. We don't know how many programs have never been made because it was too difficult to make programs. When the Luddites smashed up the equipment back in the day, the weaving material, they couldn't conceive of everybody owning lots of clothing. It was unimaginable. I can't imagine how much software's never been written because there's so much voodoo around writing software that you have to hit a certain threshold, but you even present the idea of writing code. As we broaden the ability for people to make software, how much more software could there be? It's almost unimaginable.
Absolutely.
Well, in addition to that, one thing that's so unique about this generation coming into the workforce is they have more options than ever before. They don't have to go into a huge organization for their first job. Whereas we said, okay, I'm going to get my entry level. We had this idea of the ladder, right? I'm going to build my skills. I'm going to go to the next level, and we're seeing a trend with this incoming generation saying, I don't necessarily want a ladder. I could spend all this time working to climb this ladder and find it's up against the wrong wall where I don't want to be. So instead, give me the tools to build my own ladder. We're seeing more people want to go into some sort of entrepreneurship, right? Or having even a side job where I'm building up the skills I want to build up, building up the tools I want to build up, and building up that skill level. And so instead of the career trajectory looking like this, it's looking like a lot of images, like a lot of different shapes. Now, one thing that organizations have to now rethink, have a new strategy of, is succession planning on that longer term. And this is where we see people at the top saying, we're used to, you have your junior developer and you're working your way up your senior, and you're working your way up. Now it looks different. The way that career trajectory looks different, and the way that we're upskilling and preparing for that looks different. Sometimes it's not your full-time new role. It may be a project. It may be a specific opportunity to see if that is something that you would like to go into. And that's where we're seeing more lateral moves with careers than before. And so looking at those entry-level jobs, we have entrepreneurship just on the rise. Even if it's on a side job or a weekend job, I'm learning and making money in a way that I don't have to have a corporation telling me how to make money. Whenever I got out of college, I was told you go to the big corporation, you do your entry-level job, you make your money, you earn your keep, you work your way up. That's not the main narrative that is happening in a lot of universities today. So organizations have to shift also.
For sure. So the thing I'm triggered to think, and maybe this is then my old pattern of thinking that I have to kind of like let go, but kind of like, hey, talking about the specialized people, is there a risk that we're going to lose those? Are there going to be like companies that are like, hey, I can use AI to replace or not even hire junior developers anymore because they can do that. At some point, the senior developers are going to retire. We're not really training junior developers or any other entry level, right?
Talk to anybody who's still running a COBOL system. We're not training any new developers. The ones are getting really old. They're being paid extremely well to keep working. But the actual answer is migrate off.
Yes.
Right? It's not a crisis. It's not a reason to stop. This happens all the time. It is very hard today to find someone skilled in building steam engines at scale, right? It's an obsolete technology. We've moved past it, and those skills are lost. I mean, and arguably would be difficult to train back in. There's relatively few people building operating systems these days. That's a pretty rare thing. There's a handful of people who do garbage collection and cryptography. There will always be some, and we will find solutions one way or the other. Yeah. Aging out is normal.
I think there's also the AI and the programming and all these things are ultimately there's an interface with the physical world, and that sets kind of the constraints. And a lot of the software stuff that's happening is happening inside of the box without necessarily interfacing with the world. And I think we'll be having more of that interfacing with the world happening. Where, I mean, Richard has a bunch of hobby projects where he tries to detect otters with cameras around his house, where I think there are a lot of software problems that can be solved with software, which have to do with our interactions with the physical world and with our well-being and with our climate. Et cetera, that we currently can't solve because we don't have enough people on those very complex problems, and we don't have enough people who can bring together the skill of understanding the physical aspects and have the necessary education and sense for it, and the programming pieces. So I think making programming more accessible is going to be helpful for solving more problems with software, kind of at that interface to the physical world, where we currently don't care because we are happy to do social media and we're happy to do games and think of those as problems. But I think there's more to explore, and if we go and get away from these boring things that are happening inside of the box to kind of thinking more about what we can do on the interface between the box and life, right? That gets then interesting. But for that, we need to have people who understand the life and the physics, and can go and turn that into programs that help you.
Yeah, absolutely. That is interesting. Yeah, like I said, I'm trying to kind of like discover, like maybe I'm old-fashioned, although I'm fairly sure I'm the youngest here. But yeah, maybe at some point we'll just reach a point where we'll be like, it doesn't really matter how it's implemented anymore, as long as it kind of like works. Is that kind of like where you're getting at?
Yeah, so let's say you have a scenario where you want to get people in a room to go and interact with each other in particular ways, and you have an idea. Let's say you figure out some game that you want people to play. And it's a very innovative thing, and people need to go and move on their phone or on a device. They need to move some balls in a certain direction, and everybody needs to do that in a coordinated way. I don't know what, right? Someone who understands psychology and who understands the effects of doing a game of that sort in a group. If they have an idea to do something like this, how do they realize this? Today, they have to go through 10 filters of people who go and ultimately sit in India and go and realize that thing. I mean, that's the reality of it. So if you empower those folks to go and say, I have this idea, and they can go and make this without talking to anybody but that thing, that's a pure win. And that's not software that is not being built because we fired a programmer over here, right? That software is not being built today because there is no way to go and get that thought refined so that you have a solution for it. So I think there's lots of potential here to go and create really innovative, new stuff that is driven by people who understand the domain much better than any programmer does. Because the domain-specific knowledge currently always needs to go through a programmer filter.
Right.
And if we can use AI to eliminate the programmer filter, but still for the programmers to go and provide the frameworks that those AI tools can go and ultimately program against because they have to, then that's great.
That's an interesting point. From what I'm hearing, you're kind of like on the side of people can get more creative or at least be more empowered and more enabled to do these things, right? I can imagine, looking at you, Amber, like that there's probably also a set of people who are very scared that the kind of like creative side gets taken away from them, right? Like I'm doing a little bit of content creation, you're doing a lot of content creation, I don't know about you. I can imagine that there's people like, okay, I can stop being creative, or I'm scared to stop being creative because at some point some deep fake of myself will take over the courses and teach other people things. Is that something people are worried about in that space, or?
Yes, I love what you said. I think it is anything you create, any technology, it is art and science, and you need both, right? And so any conversation we go, okay, science, and we have the conversation, right? Art's going to take over the science, science is going to take over the art. You need both at the same time. They have to work in partnership with one another. And so understanding the power of both and understanding how they both work together is so critical. We create online courses in addition to the in-person workshops, the in-person coaching. So we have online learning that you can do. That is a powerful piece of, we use AI to help. We just dubbed a lot of our courses into different languages to help reach more people. What a great use of AI to help more people. That's a good example. We've had some that, okay, we're not in that place, or there was a miss, we want to say that sentence differently, we can dub it differently. A good use of AI. We now have new information that we didn't have before, and now we can update it without having to go back into the studio, redo it. So there's powerful uses of that I would consider that the science side, right, of using it, and we're using our creative side. We're not just going to ChatGPT and saying, write me a cool script about how to give performance feedback, it giving me a generic script, and then me saying, make a video. You could do that. It's going to be very boring. What we have the opportunity then to be is edutainers at that point. So we're helping to teach in a way that is authentic, it's personable, it's memorable, and it's you can apply it in your life. And so technology has a strong piece there. We do see some competitors, they do rely fully on the technology. The impact isn't as high, right?
So well, and people quickly reject it too.
People reject it, yeah.
I think I'm seeing more and more that the measure of people's interest in things has to do with its authenticity.
Yes.
And that it doesn't have, in fact, they prefer it not too polished.
Yes.
Right? Not too shiny. Real stuff is a little messy.
Yes.
And so already we're seeing in these early days of this technology, people honing in on this is what's actually important. It's authentic. And you using tools to make things, I mean, we've been doing that since it was sticks and rocks.
Yes.
These are just new tools, and we'll make new things with them.
But I think it was Disney that said to create a good character, it has to be relatable.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at someone that's perfect and polished and has no flaws, I'm not relating to that.
No.
There's beauty. I had someone say one time that shadows make things real. What's the difference between 2D art and 3D? It's the shadows. Well, shadows are those dark places that make it real and make it authentic. And so, yeah, that's exactly what we get to provide.
On Facebook, I frequent the forums of a German sports car maker, and the fan forums around it. And I like that people have now figured out in mass, like people who are not in the technology industry, but they just happen to be, they just happen to like the same cars, to just universally reject cheaply made, AI slop, as it's called, where you basically go and write 3 sentences and then you get a picture out of it, and then people post that into a Facebook forum and say, oh, look at this new car. And by now, the universal reaction from people in the forums is go away with that stuff. And that's a good sign. That's a good sign that, because you can actually do very good, interesting things with that technology, but you can also see when someone has not made an effort to go and do something that's innovative, interesting, because everybody has played with it and everybody knows how easy it is to make something that is, effortless. And then they're like, oh, I can do this myself, you're wasting my time. So where people are educating themselves about what you can do with the technologies, and they're rejecting it if it is a waste of the time. And I think that's a good sign for going deeper on the technology, but that's also a good sign for just democracy in general, I think.
You can probably not hear it on the stream, but there are people really excited behind us. So I'm not sure what's going on, but that's fine. I was just speaking here, Richard, like you're founder and chairman of the Humanitarian Toolbox.
Yes.
Is there kind of like, which is, I should probably explain a little bit more, public charity that builds open source software for disaster relief. I can imagine that there's like cool appliances there to make that easier, to make the world a better,
it's been
make the world a better place, but
It's been a huge part of the conversation about preparedness and how we chide people into doing those. This is not an immediate thing. Like, how do you do a better job of making sure you have the things you need for the place you live, given an emergency? And that language was a really powerful tool for that, to just sort of get people to spend a little time, make sure you stock the things you need. If you replace stuff that's worn out, that sort of thing. So there's lots of places where that goes on. Disaster response is a much more complicated job, and tooling for that has always been really challenging. And those folks are extraordinary. And they're, you can't bring a phone into most disaster response sites. They like pen and paper. The battery life's awesome. But tech also helps them a lot with logistics and what do you need to deliver and what you need to do. So my time with HGBox has been extraordinary. Like, just great people to work with, and lots of role for tech to help us go to do more.
Because one of the things that I have here in my notes is like a question to drop in. Are we heading towards a more human future or a more automated one? I kind of like think, coming back to what you said.
Yes to both.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my thought too. Like you were already mentioning, like, hey, we can outsource kind of like the thing that to automate something to be more interactive with a human, and that's what you said too. Like we're going to do more automation, right? And then we can also make the world a better place. Like the relief is one thing, but then in the medical space too, like have AI help us with like detect more things, more medical issues, go to a doctor, that kind of stuff. So we're kind of like thinking we're going to a more human future with this.
Attention only became valuable when attention became scarce, right? And human-made things only became really interesting when they became scarce. Our reaction to these new tools' ability to simulate human-like thing is to value the real human thing more and to skirm between those two things. And in some ways, stripped down to our asses is a little more focused, even more, on what is it actually important in human society and how we interact. wasn't important when it was available and trivial and easy. It's more important now that it's harder.
We still ended up talking about an hour about AI mostly.
Yes, we did. But because it is an overwhelming trend without a doubt. It's one of, I look at 3 technologies that are fundamentally shifting our society right now. And oddly enough, I talk about most of them. And AI is certainly one of them.
What are the others?
Clean energy, I also see as an important role. Not necessarily the clean part, but the fact that we now have energy sources that don't consume anything, that they're just the sunlight and the wind that exist. And so suddenly power is far more available. And then biotech is the other one that also heavily leans on technology. These new generative AI models working in things like AlphaFold for understanding protein folding are going to change the way we interact with biology, full stop. Customized medicines, extended lifespans, better quality of life all around. Like, there's a lot going on at the same time, and they all interact with each other. We're only able to do this because power is more available, and more compute is available, and deeper understanding around biology is available. All of those things are working together.
You're kind of like ahead of me, because that was what I was getting at. Like, hey, what are the trends? What's things that excite you? Kind of like besides AI, is there other stuff that you get excited about? Trends that you're seeing lately, where you're like, hey, this is cool things.
What drives my work is the trend towards more timely data acquisition, data processing, and we see this in the workload that I work on is the fastest growing Microsoft product overall, and within that, the fastest growing workload inside of that, and which is all about companies having data sources in the real world. May that be people, may that be physical assets, and they want to understand them and react on changes instantly. And so we see this more and more when people are dealing with data. Velocity of being able to react with it, and also deal with the data volume, is something that's a very, very big theme within the industry.
Because that's the other thing, right? Like, whenever we talk about AI, it's kind of like an umbrella term, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff in there, and I guess like part of what powers that is a lot of data flowing all kinds of ways, right?
My corporate vice president has put on the slide, there's no AI without RTI. That's our product.
And the new cloud is just someone else's computer.
Yeah, and the truth to that is that anything we do with AI is a transformation, right? And the transformation happens only informed by actual data. It's useless if you don't set context and you don't feed real data context, and you take the real data context and make it the foundation for what the models learn. And one of the things we're forgetting often in the discussion is that we're always talking about LLMs and always talking about text generation effectively and in its various forms, but don't think about the hard math that's behind predictive models and being able to recognize things. I currently have a problem in one of my projects where I need to go and look at a football field, soccer, football field, and understand where the camera is related to the soccer field, so that I can go and project some data onto the video. It's a solved problem. It's something that has been done with machine learning, where an algorithm that's pretty fast has been trained on many pictures, and it has seen kind of all the possible angles, and it will spot them and will give you a likelihood of where the camera is. Absolute magic. I mean, you can't approach this with a normal algorithm. It's fantastic, and there's many of these algorithms. There's enormous, wonderful things you can do with math, just without even machine learning. Just doing digital signal processing to kind of figure out trends out of noisy lines and everything. So there is and doing that faster and doing that in time and being able to react is something that we see many companies clamoring for, even outside of the generate text out of a prompt kind of AI trend.
Amber, what's one trend that you're kind of like?
Inspired me to pull out my calculator, do some good math. A huge trend we're seeing is just this real craving for connection, right? Redefine. We want relationships. I mean, we're seeing it even within on the government level of having ministries of loneliness, saying, "Hey, this really is an epidemic around the world," and people know that. People are craving relationship and connection. People ask us, "What's the number one factor we look for of a success of a learning journey?" It's community, right? Am I doing this all on my own, or do I have some support, some connection to go along with this? It's the number one indicator of any sort of success within a development journey. And it's not just a development journey, it really is life. And so we're seeing that just as a trend and a need, but also people are doing something about it. They're finding new ways to connect and to communicate and to relate to one another in really powerful ways. And I think that that's where emerging technology can be a really powerful tool whenever used well. And just like we said, it's a way that we can come together and create what the future is going to be.
I love that. I'm really in the team, like, we have to adapt to this in a way that we can, offload the things that we don't really want to do to build more of those human connections, to make time for ourselves again.
Well, if we want to create something bigger than ourselves, we have to include more people than ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
Necessary.
We have a couple of minutes left. Just to close this out, Richard, in one word, how would you describe the future?
Exciting.
Exciting. Clemens?
A little scary. And it's mostly, that's not just tech. It's I'm a little worried about the whole political landscape and what's going on.
You only value something when it's in danger.
Yeah,
People are getting a little more serious about democracy these
so
days.
I'm a little scared, but also motivated to stem that tide.
Amber?
Say innovative. I think we're going to see more innovation, creativity.
Good. Well, that's all that we have for you today at Techorama TV and Techorama in general, because we're coming up on the end of the conference. I hope to see you again next year, or maybe like in 6-ish months in Belgium, because we're doing this in Belgium and in the Netherlands. We're in the Netherlands right now. I think we have a couple of closing words coming up from some of the organizers. So Roy, Kevin, please come up here to close us out for the day. And of course, thank you so much, Richard, Clemens, Amber, for joining me here and having this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
You're going to fire away, Roy?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Well, take your words now. Choose your words wisely.
So, first of all, thank you, Roy, for setting this up. This is all you. You did that. And I want to end as well with all the interviews that we did here. They're going to be available publicly. The sessions that our speakers gave, the technical sessions, are only available for people who have a Techorama ticket. So that's what I want to say. Do you want to end this thing?
Yeah, I want to end this thing. It were 2 great, amazing days with 11 Gracie panels. So I loved each and every panel, and I'm glad it's over now. So we're going to enjoy breaking up everything. We thank you for watching Techorama TV live, and we hope to see you again next year.
In May.
In May.
Techorama Belgium.
Techorama Belgium. So stay tuned, Techorama TV. We hope to see you back. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.